Good morning, Conference. We are debating F29 fair votes now. We have two amendments to the motion which are printed on pages 3 and 4 of Conference Daily, and I really would like as many people as possible to be able to speak, so I would urge speakers to keep strictly to time. Can I ask George Cunningham to stand by, and I now call Christine Jardine MP to move the motion.
Good morning, Conference. How are we all this morning? It's nice to see so many of you here early, but then it's Lib Dems, it's Conference, it's electoral reform. Why wouldn't we be here? And I must admit, as our constitutional spokesperson, I like to see myself as a bit of a rock star when it comes to electoral reform. You'll have to give me a minute, though. Unfortunately, I may be a rock star, but I've had a technical problem, and I've just managed to delete my whole speech, which could be a little bit of a problem. 2 seconds. Does that mean it'll be in the delete folder, I ask myself? Or the trash, or somewhere, trash, that's where it'll be. There we are. Imagine putting a speech about electoral reform and trash. So, this motion, which is not trash, sends a clear signal to the whole of the country about us as a party and the fairness that we stand for, because in the aftermath of the general election, when we won 72 seats, the best result for a century, and I submit we'll never tire of saying that, some predicted that now the Liberal Democrats, having achieved such success, would decide to pack it in when it comes to campaigning for a fairer voting system. After all, we did quite well under this one. That's not going to happen. And to prove we're the leading voice for proportional representation, we have a motion here which does just that. Conference, we don't support proportional representation because it would be good for us. We support it because our fundamental belief is that every vote should count, and good democracy demands it. Sadly, in this most recent general election, like so many before it, that simply was not what happened. In fact, this general election was the most disproportionate ever. We have a government which won 2/3 of the seats with only 1/3 of the votes. And more than a majority of votes cast at the election were for a losing candidate at the highest rate in 70 years. So many of us have been there, let's not go over that. Conference, first past the post is past its use-by date. It's unfair and it's unrepresentative. Millions of people's voices and votes are not accounted for or heard, and it's been going on for too long. I grew up in a Labour stronghold. My parents, whisper it, were Tories, I know. Every election in that seat, they voted Conservative. Every election in that seat, Labour was elected. You could argue that's what helped me become a Liberal Democrat, why I'm standing here arguing for PR. In the UK, it's somehow still acceptable to have a general election in which the party with the most seats did not necessarily get the most votes. Now, when that happened twice in New Zealand, they dumped first past the post and embraced a proportional system which they've used ever since. And critics can say what they like about PR and losing the local link. That's nonsense. I live under 2 different PR systems in Scotland. I know my local councillors who are elected under the STV system. I know them all quite well. They're all Liberal Democrats. 2 of them work for me. And Scottish Parliament, it's a slightly different PR system, but I know all of my MSPs, particularly the constituency one, who just happens to be the Scottish Party leader. But we want to ensure that members of Parliament in Westminster have the same sort of accountability to the communities under a new system as they have under this one. And if they do the job well, like we do, they will, regardless of PR. Of course, it wouldn't be a Lib Dem debate on fair votes without a wee mini discussion about exactly which form of PR we want. And this time it's about AV+. And I understand why. But, conference, please, don't let the possibility of a system, STV, which is very, very good and proven, be lost in the pursuit of perceived perfection. And that's not easy to say at this time in the morning. AV has been rejected before by the British public. STV works. In Scotland, we have a form of both, and people get STV in the councils. They understand it. It works. Not so much in the Parliament. It's its one weakness, that nobody quite understands the DeHont system, except maybe in this room. And it can be played. The Greens have done it spectacularly well in Scotland. But surely democracy needs a voting system which is transparent. Perfection may be an illusion. Liberal Democrats have been committed to fair votes for a century. Every vote, like every voter, counts. That's who we are, and that's what is at the heart of this motion. But it also goes further to help improve, in some cases, restore our democracy. Under the Tories, regressive changes, which made more elections, like mayoral elections first past the post, undermined the Electoral Commission. Conference, Liberal Democrats in this next Parliament will be leading the charge to reverse those changes. And we won't stop there. We'll continue to call for votes at 16. We also have that in Scotland. It didn't do any harm, and it engaged young people. The Labour government promised it in their manifesto. Now, they've gone quiet, but we won't let it stay quiet. It will be the Liberal Democrats holding them to account and reminding them of something that someone said. If you can work, if you can pay tax, if you can serve in your armed forces, then you ought to be able to vote. Who said that? Our new Prime Minister, Mr. Starmer. Sometimes, however, it feels like nothing has changed. We want to strengthen our democracy, introduce automatic inclusion on the electoral register for the health of our democracy. Some people don't want to vote, that's their decision. But we need to make it easier for people. We need to hear voices. Unlock Democracy tell us half of the countries around the world use it. It's time we caught up. And if you don't live in this country, but you're a British citizen and you live abroad, you need better representation. The 15-year rule has been scrapped, but it's not enough. And that's why we think the amendment on overseas voting is a good one, and we should accept it. Conference, building a better democracy is important to you, it's important to me, it's an important end in itself. With a better electoral system, we can strengthen our democracy. And I am proud that time and time again, it's the Liberal Democrats who have led on this. We'll continue to lead on it. So conference, please, support this motion to help us do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Could Matt McLaren please stand by? And I now call George Cunningham.
Conference, nice to be here. Good morning. I'm pleased to be addressing you today as the chair of Lib Dems Abroad Steering Committee, representing with my team almost 1,000 Lib Dem members based overseas. First of all, it's great that the party continues its commitment in this motion to creating overseas constituencies. Overseas constituents are much better off having their own MPs with an understanding of their issues to represent them better. My thanks to our MPs as well for having already submitted an early day motion on overseas constituencies so early in this Parliament. We must lobby the government to try and make this change in adequate time before the next general election, if at all possible. Conference, we've added some amendments to this excellent motion to further assist the effective exercise of overseas voting. Let me tell you why they are so important. First of all, we all believe in the principle of equality before the law, and that is never more important than when it comes to exercising our democratic rights. Overseas British voters must be part of that fair deal. Lib Dems Abroad worked with hundreds of British overseas residents in this last general election. We knew many are still passionately committed to Britain and its future for their own sakes and for the sake of those family and friends they still have living inside the UK. Our First Amendment highlights the abject failure of the past government policy to recognise this. Of the 3.5 million Britons resident abroad being entitled to vote, we believe that only between 200 and 300,000 exercise that right, according to our best estimates at this point. During the last general election, insufficient effort was made in informing them about their rights and how to exercise them, especially amongst the newly enfranchised. And that's why we call on the Electoral Commission to be provided adequate budget for effective communications to electors overseas as well as at home. We need much more publicity than last time, well ahead of the general election, to get people registered and explain the options they have for voting. And critically, in the 21st century, let's stop the chaos of ballots being delivered overseas using snail mail. We also need to allow as options secure electronic delivery of ballot papers around the world, so immediately they receive them as soon as they're ready. Voting at British embassies, consulates and high commissions, as many other countries do, and heavily promoting proxy voting. These are the only way thousands of ballots won't be lost by not arriving in the UK by polling day, as happened to our shame just now. Local councils are littered with piles of unopened ballot papers from abroad after polling day can and must be avoided. Conference. My fellow Liberal Democrats, it's time for our overseas citizens to be treated equally. It is a core principle of Liberal Democrat philosophy that all people deserve the same rights before the law. That is what our simple amendments achieve. I urgently commend them to you for your overwhelming approval. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Can Chelsea White stand by? And I now call Matt McLaren to move Amendment 2.
Good morning, Conference. I'm here today to urge you all to vote in favour of Amendment 2 and the motion as a whole. And I'm conscious that this might possibly be the most Lib Dem moment of my already very orange-saturated life, because I'm on my feet early on a Monday morning, after something of a late night, can you hear it in my voice, in a room full of Liberal Democrats debating voting systems. But to Conference, I think this debate is actually very in step with the celebration in which we're taking part here in Brighton, because we won 72 MPs. We can, indeed, yes, we can, as we celebrate, dare to whisper, what's next? And if we are to continue to be the party of the great reformist liberal tradition in this country, then we know that we must use our new strength to finish the work of a century. Nobody knows exactly what the future holds, but we are certainly closer than ever before to being in a position to demand voting reform on behalf of the majority of people in this country who believe in it. So we have to ask ourselves, when we find ourselves in that great, longed-for position, what exactly are we going to say? And crucially, how credible is the voting system that we will be asking people to put their trust in? And that is why the Enfield Liberal Democrats have brought this forward, and why, when the drafter of the motion the drafter of the amendment asked me to propose it to you all this morning, I leapt at the chance. Because I firmly believe, as they do, that we must present a realistic offer to the electorate and hasten the arrival of that glorious day when we finally clinch meaningful electoral reform. Now, the AV Plus system proposed in this amendment represents a voting system that is clearer, easier, and more suited to the British political context than STV. It is incredibly similar to the one already in use in Scotland, Wales, and in my own London for the London Assembly. And it is remarkably similar to the one in use in our European neighbour with the most similar party system to ours, Germany. Indeed, it has already been recommended in Britain before by none other than one of our party's founding fathers, that great former Chancellor and former President of the European Commission, Roy Jenkins, who recommended it in 1999 to the then Labour government after he chaired the Independent Commission into Electoral Reform. It gives us proportionality whilst maintaining the institution cherished most by the British people as part of our constitution, and of course by Liberal Democrat local champions across the country, we've now got 72 of them, the local constituency link. And it does so by making sure that the member elected in those seats also enjoys the support of a genuine majority of their constituents. Our party's pre-existing commitment to STV is, frankly, an unrealistic offer to the British people. It would water down that constituency link to the point that it is no longer recognisable. It would create lengthy delays in ascertaining the outcome of elections, which we know in our hearts would be politically unacceptable. Not just to frenzied Liberal Democrat agents like myself, but to the country as a whole. And even with a relatively small multi-member constituency of just 5 MPs, and with only the 5 biggest parties in England standing, let alone independents, aggrieved Corbynistas, or nationalists, voters would then be faced with a ludicrously long ballot paper asking them to rank 25 candidates, most of whom they will invariably have never heard of. So the single transferable vote simply has no hope of ever receiving consensus support in some future divided parliament to actually become a reality. So Britain will finally achieve electoral reform one day. It is not a utopian dream, but we owe it to over a century of Liberal activists who've delivered leaflets in the rain to actually demand a system that will be accepted and still delivers proportionality. Thank you. Please vote for Amendment 2.
Thank you. Can Paul Edgeworth please stand by? And I now call Chelsea Wyatt from Runnymede.
Good morning, Conference. I stand here as the recent parliamentary candidate for Slough, as a first-time speaker at Conference, and as peak Lib Dem speaking on a motion about proportional representation. I've been fortunate to work with a number of politicians, most of whom have been elected through various systems of proportional representation. I know this is a rare occurrence and one that has unfortunately become more rare thanks to recent Conservative electoral changes. But I don't want this to be the case. I want a future in which every person in this country feels like their vote matters. In my spare time, I have the pleasure of visiting local schools to deliver presentations about democracy and voting systems. While I can't be party political, these talks provide an opportunity for me to, not so subtly, convince the future generations of the benefits of PR. While I get the students to vote for their favourite canteen snacks using different voting systems, we discuss the excuses people give for why they don't vote. The main excuse that comes up is because people don't think their vote matters. We've all heard it on the doorsteps, but I know with this motion, we want to give people a reason to think their vote counts. However, we all probably know the value of having a local champion. After all, we now have 72 of them. If we believe in community politics, then we have to offer those kids a system they can trust and believe in for the future, one that is credible and which means they will always have a local champion fighting for them. A system of AV+ is the best system that will make people's votes count while retaining local constituency representatives. That's why I urge you to vote for Amendment 2 to ensure we retain local representatives in Parliament so we can make good on our promise to be local champions for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can Tom Brake please stand by? And I now call Paul Edgeworth, who wishes to speak against parts of the motion. Or not. Okay. Tom Brake, are you available to come immediately? Thank you, Tom.
Conference. I've been a Liberal or a Liberal Democrat for 40 years, but it's as Director of Unlock Democracy that I'm speaking today. Unlock Democracy campaigns for democratic reforms in the United Kingdom, and we welcome and campaign on every single measure the Liberal Democrats are advocating here. I'm not sure whether that's a coincidence or not. We support automatic voter registration, make sure those 6.5 million people who are eligible to vote but are not on the register get on it. Votes at 16, it works in Scotland and Wales. scrapping photographic voter ID. 750,000 people did not vote, according to the Electoral Commission, in the last general election because of photographic voter ID. And overseas constituencies, making sure that overseas citizens have proper representation in the UK Parliament. I thank Christine for tabling the early day motion 122. There are 11 Liberal Democrat signatures on it, which in the past meant the whole parliamentary party. There are in fact 72 Liberal Democrats, so that means there are 61 Liberal Democrat names missing from that EDM at the moment. So I hope that's something that can be addressed. This brings me to the subject of PR. In the Times today, Matthew Parris, in an article entitled "If Lib Dems are smart, they'll watch and wait," suggests the Lib Dems should soft pedal on PR. He's wrong. We've been there before. We rarely referred in our leaflets and party political broadcasts to Europe in the past. We were shy about our support. We failed to develop the public-facing arguments for why EU membership mattered to business, young people, the NHS, and farming. We can't afford to make the same mistake in relation to PR. It'll be too late once any campaign has got underway, particularly if a referendum is going to take place. So we need to prepare the ground now to win the argument. That means honing the argument for business that PR is the best guarantee of stability. First past the post no longer delivers strong and stable government. We need to convince the media that it is a system of voting where one party can win 2/3 of the seats on 1/3 of the vote that is the biggest risk to our democracy. And we need to demonstrate to the public that their concerns over the cost of living are more likely to be addressed by parties working together than they are by wild swings of the political pendulum. So, Mr. Parris, we need to make plenty of noise and say lots on PR, although not incidentally about the merits of different types of PR versus another, to win the case for this most transformational change. The prize is within our grasp, and I hope we will grasp it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can Michael Kilpatrick please stand by? And I now call Keith Sharp. Oh, not another one. Yes, well done. I thought you were another person who wasn't going to turn up. I beg your pardon.
I can confirm I am here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Chair of Liberal Democrats for Electoral Reform, and while I really want to talk about campaigning today, Amendment 2 does deserve some attention. Could I just say that in terms of looking at systems analyses, we have done our homework, and if anybody wants to come to our stall on H7, we've got masses of material there that we can go through. Unfortunately, I can't support Amendment 2. Couple of critiques. AMS is not going as successfully as the amendment suggests. There are several concerns being raised over the years, and more pointedly, specifically in Wales, AMS has been ditched, rejected for future Senedd elections because it doesn't cut it. And of course, the case for fair votes is more than party proportional, but again, I have to say with this amendment, with a maximum of a 1/3 top-up component, that proposal probably wouldn't reach party proportionality in any case. But single transferable vote, as Christine put so well, empowers the individual voter. And surely that's what we as liberals are all about. It shares, thank you, it shares and it disperses power rather than holding it in the center, because it gives more choice and more voice to the individual voter. So if you agree that voting systems are first and foremost for the voter, then you will continue to support STV, and I hope you all will. As I say, very happy to talk on our stall about the ins and outs of various systems. However, I did want to talk about campaigning, because we do have an opportunity, as Christine and Tom have both said. What we're finding is, excuse me, the key is in lines 32 to 36 of the main motion, which talks about millions feeling underrepresented, powerless, cut out of the system. So the question on the doorstep could be, is politics working for you? Does your vote count? And if we move to that, we can start the discussion going towards proportional representation and hopefully STV. Fair votes differentiates us. Labour supports at conference in its motions, but is being resisted by the party leadership. So it's a good differentiator for us as we get out on the doorstep with Labour and the Conservatives. Finally, it is the right thing to do and it is urgent. Political inequality is gnawing away at the foundations of our democracy, the lack of accountability and the ability of governments to deliver change. Look at the current Labour government on its shaky 34% of the vote, pursuing Conservative-style policies. Vote against Amendment 2, vote for the motion, and then let's get out there and get campaigning. Thank you.
Thank you. Can Alice Thompson please stand by? And I now call Michael Kilpatrick, who wishes to speak against the motion.
Well, this is slightly awkward, speaking against Christine and Tom, but please don't for a minute think I'm against PR, because that would be jolly silly. No, I'm going to make my point again and again and again, and some of you know what that's going to be. Now, Tom mentioned 40 years. It was 40 years ago when I sort of politically woke up as a teenager. My first election was in 1987, and I remember the rise of the SDP and the Alliance and so on, and I knew straight away that we needed a proper electoral system. So I've been voting Lib Dem ever since. That's 40 years ago, pretty much. So just to park that thought for a minute, I'm afraid that unless we actually address the fact that it's structural reforms that are the problem that we need to address in this country, we're going to get nowhere. Because I'm sorry, a House of Commons elected by PR is still a remote, centralised parliament. It doesn't address empowerment, and we have policies on empowerment that actually make a big difference, but we're not selling them. You may have more MPs of more parties and a different political landscape, but I think a PR parliament would still be predominantly big national parties. That's not really any more than half the solution at best. We need to address that. And it's a big shame that our manifesto, which did have quite a lengthy section on constitutional reform, actually failed to mention one of the points that I was involved in 3 years ago, which addresses structural issues in England, which is 85% of the population in the UK. How can we have got that so wrong? We need to change the focus and not really be a one-trick pony. I'm very sorry to say that, because it does get a bit tiresome, having voted in 10 general elections and have our headline policy still as PR, which doesn't solve the problem. I think if you vote for this motion, it doesn't substantially change our policy, of course, and neither does rejecting it. I don't expect anyone actually to reject the motion. But we have an amendment on AMS. But actually, that misses the point too, because it isn't the fact that we're removing localism MPs. It's the fact that with empowerment taken down from Westminster, the local issues are solved by more local parliaments. So arguing the hell about which system isn't the point, because you're missing the focus of our structural reform ideas, because we just don't have joined-up thinking. I'm sorry, so I'm going to keep on banging on about structural reforms until that becomes more of a focus for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could Lisa Smart please stand by? And I now call Alice Thompson.
Good morning, conference. My name is Alice Thompson. I live in Berlin, Nantwich, Cheshire, and I'm from the northwest. We tried so hard to we tried so hard to get Rob Hurd as a winner MP, but unfortunately the Conservatives got in, and so I strongly believe in proportional representation, and I think that, I think that our current voting system is not fair, it's not proportional, and I think it should be changed to a more fairer, more, instead of having one MP, we should have 2 MPs. That way it's a bit more fair and more proportional. Thank you.
Morning all, 9 a.m, very much where all the cool kids are at Lib Dem conference talking about our favourite voting systems. Our politics just isn't working. For too many people, they feel like they're not being listened to, and they've got really good reason to feel like that. Most people didn't get what they voted for in this last general election. We had the last parliament overwhelmed by sleaze scandal after sleaze scandal. And having recently been elected as the Member of Parliament for the finest constituency in the land of Hazel Grove, thank you, I've seen up close just how impenetrable some of our parliamentary systems are and how on earth can ordinary people engage meaningfully with that. We've got trust at a worryingly low level, and we need to fix our politics. We need to rebuild that trust. We need fair and equal votes. We need 16 and 17-year-olds to be able to vote like they already can in Scotland. And of course, we need the House of Lords to be elected, but that's a debate for another day. I was recently delighted to be elected as the Vice Chair for the APPG on fair elections. This APPG is pushing forward the cause of both PR, but also against dark money in politics and mis and disinformation. And I was really encouraged by the turnout at that APPG meeting. It's a cross-party organisation, and the returners, so those people who were in the last Parliament, said it was the biggest turnout they had ever seen. That's a really encouraging thing for the progress we might be able to make in this Parliament. I really support this motion, very happy to vote in favour of Amendment 1, but I will be opposing Amendment 2. Not because I have a particular favourite voting system, although of course I'm a Liberal Democrat too, but because that's not the argument we should be having. There has been a lot of work done by the democracy sector over a number of years, including people like Make Votes Matter, including ERS, including Fair Vote, Unlock Democracy, who've worked on how can we move the case for PR forwards. And it's by making it less technical, making it less technocratic, stop being such massive nerds about it, and talk about things in a way that people care about, can relate to, and get behind. So let's think about the Make Votes Matter Good Systems Agreement, which says let's just say what we want a PR system to be. We want it to be fair, we want it to be equal. Let's stop being such nerds. We need reform. We get there by talking about it in ways people care about, by working with colleagues of other parties and of none. And my last plea is the way we definitely get PR is by getting more Lib Dems elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Can Caroline Voden stand by to summate Amendment 1? And with apologies for the lack of notice, can I call Ruvi Ziegler, please, to the stand?
Right. Good morning, conference. I want to talk about 2 elements, one of them already mentioned today in Amendment 1, that make this motion particularly good, and those relate to making our democracy more inclusive. Ultimately, what this motion does is it recognizes what in political philosophy we call stakeholding principle, the idea that all those who have a stake in the future of a particular polity through the circumstances of their lives should be allowed to have a say in that future. And that means that citizenship and residence are not mutually exclusive, that those who are long-term residents in this country, as this motion recognizes in lines 62 to 66, should be able to vote in elections. In fact, some of them already do if they come from the Commonwealth or from Ireland. And so it basically levels up, to coin a phrase. But also that those who live abroad should not just be able to vote, as the law already allows them to do now since the last election, but should be allowed to vote effectively. Right? And so what I want to focus my remarks on is on that latter point. right, on why should we have overseas constituencies. So let's look at why the current model, where people vote in the constituencies they may have lived 30 or 40 years ago, is not effective. It's not effective because the MPs who represent them, however well-meaning they'll be, have very little experience of case law that relates to their type of predicament. And it's because their interests are by definition dwarfed by those, the predominant number of people who live in the constituency itself. If we had a system of overseas constituencies, as I should say 17 countries in the world already do, and that includes France, Italy, Croatia, Portugal, Romania, and Lithuania, so countries from different parts of Europe, different types of traditions historically and otherwise, what we would have is first a strengthened form of representation, because we would have dedicated MPs whose case law would be concentrated on the issues that pertain to those who live abroad. And indeed, I would argue the interest would then be aligned. Because if you just think, for instance, on British citizens living in the European Union, it is very clear that some of their predicament is very specific to them. It's different even than British citizens living elsewhere in the world, and it's certainly different than those who live in the constituencies, the territorial constituencies in the UK. And I would argue it would simplify participation. So I think Amendment 1 is very important and definitely should be supported. But in a way, it illustrates the problem, because it's by this bizarre link to some constituency in the UK that makes this need to send postal ballots, that makes the need to rely on electoral registration officers here. And so actually, if you had a system not just of automatic registration, but of the ability to vote where you are, that would increase participation. So I call you to support the motion and support Amendment 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Can Matt McLaren please stand by? And I now call Caroline Bowden MP to summate Amendment 1.
Good morning, Conference. What a great way to start a Monday morning discussing PR. I would like to stress, first of all, that the proposers of this amendment that I have come to summate considers it to be completely compatible with the motion of a whole, which we also support wholeheartedly. So in summating this amendment, I'd like to just address the fundamental of what we are trying to achieve. It is a fundamental part of what makes our party unique that we are passionate about the equality of opportunity. We believe in equality of opportunity in healthcare, in social care, in housing, in obtaining valuable work, and in the pay all workers receive, particularly women. Indeed, in every area of civil society you can think of, equality of opportunity is what Liberal Democrats campaign for, instinctively and comprehensively. These amendments go some way to ensuring equality of opportunity, also to participate in our democracy. We want to extend to all British citizens the same equality of opportunity. And to do this, we must make it simple and convenient for British residents to vote in UK elections wherever they live in the world, and regardless of how slow their postal service may be. Can anyone really say that British pensioners living abroad have nothing to tell us about their pension rights, how much pension they receive, and whether their pensions should be unfrozen? Can anyone really say that the opinions of almost 1 million British people resident in the EU have nothing to say that is worthy of consideration on the disastrous fallout of the previous government's botched Brexit deal? They now find themselves second-class citizens in both Britain and the EU, and we need them to be consulted in future elections. Can anyone really say that the opinions of more than 53,000 British people living in Hong Kong and mainland China have nothing to say about how Hong Kong is now ruled, with the gradual eking away of their freedoms and the rule of law? Fellow Liberal Democrats, these amendments right a historic wrong. They simply ensure that all British people are treated equally, no matter where they currently reside. I'm very pleased to see us once again calling in our motion for overseas constituencies that can truly represent these British citizens. So I ask you, therefore, for your complete and enthusiastic support for Amendment 1 and for the motion of a whole. Please back both this Amendment number 1 and the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will Al Pinkerton please stand by, and can Matt McLaren now come and summate Amendment 2?
Hello again. So, first of all, let me be 100% clear, because let's be honest, this isn't the most exciting or indeed clear of topics, that not a single person, body, or anyone else in this conference hall is arguing against proportional representation this morning. Simply the debate on Amendment 2, which is a logical debate for us to have, and now is the time to have it, if we're going to have it at all, is which proportional system should the Liberal Democrats, as a party, be advocating for? Because we have to have a starting point when we are negotiating with, for example, a future Labour government on this. So to respond to Christine, when she talked about the AV referendum, which was a personal disappointment, bitter disappointment for me back in 2011, AV Plus, despite the similarity in name, is absolutely not the alternative vote. It is not. In fact, the similarity between AV and AV Plus is literally identical to the similarity between the AMS system used in Scotland and first past the post we use for Westminster elections. And it would be a bit absurd criticising the Scottish parliamentary elections on the basis of flaws with the Westminster system for the Westminster Parliament. And it's similarly a bit bothersome to complain about AV Plus on the basis of the flaws of AV. Chelsea White was absolutely right when she talked about the need to preserve the very important local constituency, local champions that we Liberal Democrats do so well. And the movers of Amendment 2 have brought this forward today precisely because we don't believe that STV does that. And indeed, having been a former European candidate myself for a large multi-member constituency, I can tell you that there is no way, had I been elected, fortunately I wasn't, it was on the night that we lost most of our MEPs but one, the legendary Catherine Bidder. If I had been elected, it would have been virtually impossible for me to think of myself as a local constituency parliamentary member for the whole of London. Tom Brake is absolutely right in his point that we need to develop the argument for PR over time. We cannot just not talk about it in the way that we didn't really talk about Europe for 10 years and then look what happened there. So again, we do have to decide which system is our kind of starting point in this. But whatever system we go for, whatever the outcome of today's vote, we should absolutely always be pointing out that the current system is unfit for purpose because a government can win 2/3 of the seats on 1/3 of the vote. Now, Keith Sharp talked about STV's virtues being, quote unquote, to empower the individual. And I absolutely agree that voting systems are first and foremost for the voter and should be very clear and understandable to the voter in terms of what they're voting for and how people are elected from that. But let me ask you this question. How can any of you explain how MPs would actually be elected through STV? Because despite having studied maths at degree level, I see some hands going up, so well done you. But maybe I'm just dumb, I don't know, but despite having studied maths for a couple of years at degree level before, I certainly can't. I can't explain that to somebody. Now, Michael Kilpatrick, I absolutely agree with you about the need to focus on structural reforms, but we nevertheless still do need to decide what our starting position on this is going to be, so we have to decide what system we'll be advocating for. Alice Thompson, we can and indeed absolutely should have a fair and proportional voting system whilst preserving that single MP link, single MP local constituency link. That's what I would say we need to preserve that. And Lisa Smart, yes, we absolutely need a fair and equal votes. But if we want to be less technical about this and not be nerds, and I say that despite being a proud nerd myself, then as I say, we have to have a system that the voters understand. And with AV Plus, we tell them you simply need majority of support in your own local constituency, and then you get some top-up MPs based on proportionality. That is really easy for voters to understand. So in conclusion, both for the voters and for the sake of great Liberal Democrat local champions, please vote for Amendment 2. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Al Pinkerton MP to submit the motion as a whole, after which we will move to the votes.
Good morning, nerds. Thank you very much for for turning out. It's a wonderful debate to be part of because this is a vote. This is a motion that is all part of our core values. This is about ensuring that every vote counts, and it is timely to have this debate now. As Christine Jardine said in her introduction to this morning, 2024 was the most disproportionate election that we have ever had, a government with 2/3 of the seats and 1/3 of the vote, and that has practical implications in the House of Commons, and I can tell you that because I sit on those green benches along with my colleagues. This isn't just theoretical, it's not just conceptual, it has material consequences for us, for the way that we heat our homes in the winters. The Tories were poor stewards of our democracy. They undermined the Electoral Commission, they expanded first past the post to mayors and PCC elections. Let's just quickly summate and go through some of the amazing speakers that we've heard this morning. I was very struck by George Cunningham, who made a very powerful case for overseas constituencies. 3.5 million entitled voters, only 200,000 of whom actually voted, encouraging us to think about promoting that right more, using technology, expanding voter opportunities, and who wouldn't want to do that? That's part of our core values. Let's turn quickly to Matt McLaren, Amendment 2, and the Enfield Liberal Democrats, who, along with Chelsea White, advocated for Amendment 2 and the alternative vote system. Arguing powerfully, I think, that a constituency link could be made, and I thought Chelsea made a very powerful point about young people need to be given reassurance and hope that their votes will always matter, whatever the outcome of this morning's vote. I know that that is what we all seek to prioritise. Tom Brake from Unlock Democracy, again, talking about voting at 16, scrapping photo ID. 750,000 people didn't vote this year round because of photo ID. And let's face it, it wouldn't be the first time that Matthew Parris has got something wrong. First past the post doesn't deliver the strong and stable governments. I was very struck by that point. Strong and stable can often also be a risk to our democracy when 2/3 of seats are given to only 1/3 of the vote share. Keith Sharp spoke powerfully against the Amendment 2, highlighting the AV's challenges to proportionality and brought us back to STV as a really good example of how you can share power and give choice to the voter. But then he also brought us back to that really important point about campaigning. Fair votes. Does your vote count? That ultimately is what we have to really try and prioritise. Michael Kilpatrick reminded us of our radical traditions, looking at more fundamental structural reforms and why we need to keep those in mind. Alice Thompson gave a powerful and passionate call for fairness and to ensure that we get what we voted for. Lisa Smart called us all nerds and then reminded us about actually some of the other issues that this is associated with that may not be quite so obvious and straightforward. Dark money, mis and disinformation, and the vital necessity to cast a far brighter spotlight than we have had before in recent times on the accountability and transparency of our political system. Ruby Ziegler, moving to overseas constituencies, I thought was incredibly powerful in demonstrating the need for overseas constituencies to give focus and voice and more dedicated casework opportunities for MPs who could really specialise in representing overseas UK voters. I thought it was a powerful point, very well made. And that, of course, was continued by Caroline Voden, who talked about making overseas voting work, properly implementing it, making sure it works. I know people in my own constituency or people who wanted to vote for me but overseas were unable to do so because polling cards never arrived. Pensioners living in the EU do deserve a voice. They do have something to say on the country that they paid into for the majority of their working lives. Whatever the outcome of today's debate, this is a vote for votes at 16, about automatic enrolment on the electoral register, about overseas voting, making sure it's implemented properly, and for tidying up our democracy. And that ultimately is where our democracy will be strengthened. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. We now move to the votes. There will be 3 votes. The first vote is on Amendment 1, then Amendment 2, and then the amendment as a whole, as amended. Sorry, the motion as a whole as amended, if it's amended. So let's see those people who are in favour of Amendment 1. Thank you. And those against Amendment 1? I'm just going to check the online. The online agrees with the Hall, and that is very clearly carried. Can I see those in favour of Amendment 2? Thank you. And those against? I will just check the online voting. Again, there's total agreement. That is lost. Can I now see those in favour of the motion as a whole, as amended by those amendments? Those in favour? Thank you. And those against? I think that's carried with one dissension. Let me check online. Yes, it's the same. So it is definitely carried. Thank you very much indeed. Can I thank my aides, Cara Jenkinson, sorry, I'm not with it today, and Eleanor Kelly, and I now hand over to Tim Farron.
Hello, conference. Well, we can all say that we were there when the Liberal Democrats shockingly decide that we still support electoral reform. No one could have predicted that, but thank you all of you for being here. My name is Tim Farron. I'm the MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, and back in April or May, I think it was, Sir Edward Davey sidled up to me in the tea room and said, "I've got a thing to ask you to do." And I said, "All right, what's that then?" And he asked me if I would chair the general election review. And I kind of said yes, because it's rude to say no, isn't it? But looking back, you might think that this is a pretty good general election to review. And clearly, you know, if one had to choose between any of the recent general elections we've had that you might want to review, this would be the one that you might choose. But I'll say this, the process that we have in reviewing the general election of the 4th of July 2024 is one that we take very, very seriously. I will explain why I think it matters so much in a moment or two, but let me just tell you a little bit about the process. So the review has begun. The panel, whom I will introduce to you in a moment, have begun their work. The process of looking, first of all, back at the 2019 review and the recommendations made there to ensure that they were actually followed up and put into practice will form the first part of that review. But the main part of what we'll be doing is collecting evidence from all of you, should you wish to give it to us, via a survey, via the web page, which is not up there yet, but it will be for you to see. We want you to look at the survey and to complete it and to tell us, from whatever perspective you come from, what you think about a range of issues, and we'll give you some clues as to what kind of headings we might corral our evidence under. But let me first of all introduce you to the panel. I'm having the privilege of chairing the general election review. The other members of the panel are, if you'd like to stand up, so Councillor Adi Adeyemo, Paul Farthing, Councillor Donna Harris, Councillor Emma Holland-Lindsay, I don't think is here, but she might be. Give us a shout and wave if you are. Mike O'Carroll, and Sally Pattle, who I
don't think is here, but if you are, wave furiously. So, chaired by myself, but more importantly, aided and supported by Venus Ali. So Venus and Paul, indeed, who are chair and aid of this session, although I think technically I'm chairing it, which I don't think I've ever done at conference ever before. So be gentle with me. I think this is my 68th party conference and the first one I've technically chaired. So hurrah for me. Yes, thank you. First time delegate sort of thing. Be gentle. So I think there are two elements of what we're seeking to do. We've said that we will obviously begin with, so I say three really, but a quick preamble is the looking back at what happened in 2019, or rather what happened with the recommendations from the 2019 review, to ensure there's a level of accountability that the party did seek to put those things into practice. But there are two parts of the review over the 2024 campaign, and one is basically to review our performance during the campaign period itself, the preparatory work and the strategy throughout the whole Parliament leading up to what turned out to be the election on July the 4th, 2024. But I'm going to say that maybe the even more important part of what we will do, if I may be so bold, is to look at the lessons for the future, relevant to the party's next stages in our development, linking between electoral success at different levels, and then we want to make recommendations accordingly. We've been in this hall several times over the last few days, and we will, over the next day and a half, be in a very celebratory mood. It is wonderful, breathtaking really, to be alongside such a fantastic array of new colleagues. To have been a member of the parliamentary party, indeed leader of the parliamentary party when there were just 8 of us, and today to be with 72 is utterly, utterly thrilling and is obviously a triumph. But, as I have said more than once at this conference, it's a ticket to the big league. It is not to be seen as some achievement that all we do is celebrate. The question is, what do we do next? Again, you'll have heard me quote this person several times at conference if you've been at anything that I've spoken at, and if you come across a good quote, you keep using it. The 3rd century BC Greek philosopher Polybius once said, "Those who know how to win are more numerous than those who know how to make good use of their victories." And our job now is to make good use of our victory. So I'm kind of fine with us being celebratory in our mood over these few days. My suggestion to you that the celebration tails off very soon, because we have a job to do, to hold a government to account, to build the Liberal movement, and to do well at the next general election. Not seeking to be a misery, but winning is everything. You change no one's lives from 2nd, 3rd or 4th place. So look, we've introduced the panel to you, most of whom are here. I'm really grateful to them for the amount of time they're giving up to this review. We'll talk you through, I don't know if we've got in terms of the slides, we've got a link to the review. So probably in terms of volume, the way we will to gather most evidence will be via people going on that link and filling in the survey. Please do it, and take as long as you like to do it. The deadline for getting those responses will be the 18th of October this year. We will be doing lots of, won't be for everybody because we just don't have the resources to do this, but we will be doing a lot of qualitative stuff where we do some sit-down interviews with some people as well. We have, as a panel, come to the view that we're going to probably build our report under 5 headings. So moving on to the next slide if we can. So those are the 5 headings that we are looking at the moment. So candidate and agent training and support, membership engagement, fundraising across the party, the delivery and implications of the target seat strategy, and then political strategy and positioning. If you have a view and opinion or any kind of feedback you want to give us whatsoever that you don't think immediately fits under those 5 headings, don't worry. We're just as interested in what you have to tell us. We're just trying to order, if you like, the kind of bodies of work, the kind of areas of investigation and inquiry under those particular headings. We've said that the deadline for responses to the survey is the 18th of October. We will have concluded all of our kind of other qualitative and quantitative research in advance of that. And the aim is to be able to report to you at our Spring Party Conference with a full report with recommendations that we'll then want to have your feedback on. So how are we going to do today? Well, at the beginning of the block just there, you'll see, first of all, there is the interventions mic by the little orange banner just there. And at the row of seats, I'm just looking, so the first row of the, if you're from where you're sitting, the back left block is where you must sit if you would like to intervene. What we're going to do today is, for a period of time, perhaps about 50 minutes now, take interventions from the floor. Not in any particular order. You can pretty much say everything and anything you like, with the caveat you've got 90 seconds. Now, having said that, if we end up with very few people wanting to speak, we may review that. But the idea will be you'll have a 90-second intervention. You will be orange lighted at 60 seconds and cut off at 90. If there is a dearth of people interested in speaking, then we may revise that during our session. And it's not to cut people off. In a sense, this is one small part of the evidence gathering that we're seeking to do. But given we have the slot that we have, we're trying to make most efficient use of it. Probably the way you can deliver the most fulsome and comprehensive input into this process is by filling in the survey, so please do that. But we're delighted to hear people's views today. At the end, Paul will summate on behalf of the panel, listening to the things that people say today. And it's really important that we do use this opportunity to do that. So I'm going to ask the stewards to gather people. I can see a decent row of people there already. So I will kind of chair this, but essentially police yourself. If you see the orange, get yourself ready to conclude. The red one kind of got 5 seconds, really. Other than that, thank you very much indeed, all of you, for being here. Thanks to all of those who are preparing to say something. Stewards, over to you. And I should also say, when you do come to the mic, tell us who you are, what constituency you're from, and any other kind of qualifying CV point, whether you're a candidate or an agent or something else. You're first, go for it.
Hello, I am Rob Wilson from Enfield. I'm chair. I've previously been a PPC. Look, you can't argue with the success, and I don't intend to. It was a great win. I just say that our model is for non-target seats to help target seats. When you've got a national party saying effectively, vote for who's second, when you're not second, we lose a lot of people. We need some red meat for the non-target seats. Labour gave them the VAT on schools thing, wherever you agree with, or not, that got people through the door to help them work. We are becoming the casualty of someone else's dreams. We have to have something for the non-targets. We are becoming a regional party. We had some great success. I stood in a sports hall till 6 p.m. with a lot less people this time and came third to the Greens and Reform. Fifth when we were solidly third before. We've got great success in areas, but the pull of having a new MP 20 miles away isn't what we think it is. Anyway, I'm yellow lighted, so I'll shut up. But we need to help non-targets.
Rob, thank you. Thank you, Rob. Appreciated.
Hi, Tim. John Grout, Chair of the Reading Local Party, and I was agent for Reading Central and Reading West and Mid Berkshire. I was also heavily involved in Early and Woodley, which is the third Reading seat. A sort of a different tack from what was said before. In Reading, we had a lot of our members active, mostly in Wokingham, but also lots of members active north of the river in South Oxfordshire, Henley, and in Newbury as well, all of which I'm pleased to say won. So I'd echo the comments of the previous speaker, because in Reading, although in 2 of the 3 seats we sort of reached our expectations, in 1 seat we significantly underperformed our expectations. 2 things very quickly. In that seat, we had some members who were older or infirm or otherwise unable to travel due to childcare commitments. So what we said to our members is, if you can, go to Wokingham, which was our paired target, or Newbury if you live in the west of the borough. But if you can't, on polling day in our held wards, we will do some telling just so we have some data for the next council elections. One of our candidates then got a call from HQ saying, why are you doing this? So in future, I'd urge you to say, please, if you can move. But the other thing I would say is, we were encouraged early on to give our candidates clarity, and we were encouraged to do this in the constituency profiles. That was good. It meant our candidates didn't get candidatitis and knew what was expected of them, but they were posted online and still available online in March, and they appeared in opposition literature, being encouraged to be frank. So I would encourage future selections to have them only available via email from the returning officer.
John, thank you very much.
Hello, Tim. It's Richard Whelan from Oxford East, and I was the PPC for Basingstoke at the general election just gone. And I think that's the part of the problem. I've tried to go for key seats when I was trying to gain selection, and I struggled. I got basically a handful of first preference votes, and I think a lot of the problem there is that I think I struggled to try and get selected for key seats because my experience is less than able-bodied people's because of my disability. So I think we need to see how we can get more disabled candidates selected into key seats of the next election so that we can have a good chance of getting elected and so that hopefully we can actually be part of a bigger, wider party next time round.
Richard, thank you very much. Yeah. Richard, yeah, really, really grateful for that, and indeed for being the candidate for us in Basingstoke this time. Thank you.
Councillor Wendy Taylor from Newcastle. I was supporting our candidate in Newcastle East, a seat we were never going to win. But when the election was called, we were left scrabbling around trying to work out how we could get something out to our voters that would be helpful so that we could concentrate on helping Tim and Tom Gordon in Harrogate. What I would suggest is, could we have a plan worked out well in advance for seats that we are not going to win so that we could have some targeted literature ready to send out, something that's simple, doesn't take us a lot of time, but it's organised in advance. We lost an awful lot of deposits in this election, and that's a terrible waste of money. If we could just work out how we can save more deposits, minimum effort, but at least show voters in non-target seats that we are interested in their views.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy, and thanks for coming to Westminster so much, and many congratulations on the brilliant by-election result on Thursday in Jesmond. I'm going to say a word for my friend Jerry Keating, who stepped down to create that by-election. He's a top bloke, and he's been a great servant to the party for decades and decades, but has, through ill health, had to step down. So, Jerry, we are so grateful to you. Yes.
Okay. Leon Devine from Bassett Law, North Nottinghamshire. Yes, we got lots of new MPs this time round, but our overall share of the vote didn't increase by very much. And that's worrying because there are vast swathes of the country where I live in North Nottinghamshire, across in South Yorkshire with the exception of Hallam, the West Midlands with the exception of in Shropshire. We are not getting many votes, and I think we need to think about how we can make sure that in any election everybody has the chance not just to vote Lib Dem, but actually see what the Lib Dems are doing. And we just didn't get that to where we were. And also another quick point is the agents and the people who were standing were under a lot of pressure. It's very difficult when you don't have a lot of time. Everybody has jobs to do. They're not full-time workers. And some of the help they were getting from the centre was delivered, and I don't think they realised quite how much of a struggle it is for volunteers in these dead-end seats to do that work and not get the support they needed.
Thank you, Leon.
Simon Pike, West Berkshire and Newbury Local Party. Based on my experience of our local campaign, I estimate that the party's literature nationwide was consumed between 1,000 and 2,000 tonnes of paper, which is equivalent to several tens of thousands of trees. I appreciate that that is partially recycled, but could you consider the environmental impact of our campaigns in your review? Thank you.
Thank you. I feel obliged to say that even in Westmoreland, where we pretty much delivered all the paper that there was, that all of our literature together is probably equivalent to one copy of the Observer or the Daily Mail, and we're up against them every day. So, sorry, I felt the need to express orthodoxy. That doesn't mean we're not listening. Thank you, Simon. Go on. Sorry.
Hi Tim, my name's Rebecca and I was our candidate in Hackney North and Stoke Newington this election. However, I've just moved to Islington North. So here in Hackney, we fell from 7.5% of the vote to just 3.8%, therefore losing our deposit. You know, we couldn't even afford to do direct mail. The same is true in a lot of North London constituencies, such as those in Islington, where we fell from 2nd place to 6th and 3rd, respectively. The key thing, in all of these three constituencies, we came behind the Green Party. So I just really wanted to ask two questions. Will the review be looking at the potential consequences of our targeting system in terms of losing ground in non-target seats, especially to the Greens, and how this will impact the ability for us to win council seats in these areas? And secondly, will the team be looking at the impact of this strategy on the funding of local parties, given how many deposits were lost, the lack of fundraising we were able to do, and potentially how we could change the MP's tithe to also be able to fund non-target constituencies? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for those points, and thank you for being our name on the ballot paper. We're really grateful.
Malcolm Mitchell of Ipswich. I was not able to do any canvassing or knocking on doors. So in 2020, when there was an appeal for assistant returning officers, I volunteered for this, had the training, and I encourage other people to do this if there are, especially if you're in my situation, that there is a shortage of people for being assistant returning officers to help select in non-target seats, and the possibility of being promoted to a regional, to a full returning officer for target seats later on. Thank you.
Malcolm, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. George Cunningham, Chair of Lib Dems Abroad. For the first time, the party fought the general election overseas. And we have a lot of experiences. It was, of course, a very, very different kind of campaign. No leafleting, but more digital, press and media and so on. We had no resources to do it, but we have 700 members abroad, many of whom participated. So I just wanted to say that there was a massive completely new learning experience. I do hope that we can come to you and maybe have an in-person interview. We are writing a report with our experiences. Also, the fact that the party didn't really understand sometimes our needs. So obviously that is something that it will be very useful. We have 5 years probably to the next general election, and I think we can be better prepared with the experiences we had. Thank you so much.
George, thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning. Councillor Rachel Bentley. I was the parliamentary candidate in Bermondsey and Old Southwark, which is one of our very few second places and one of only 6 to Labour. So I stand here absolutely delighted, along with everyone else, with our 72 MPs and our wonderful campaign that was joyful, it was engaging, and we're really all very proud of it. But we have to think about our urban areas. We have to think about our young and transient voters. And we've got to think about our diversity as a party. And if we fail to work in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool, in Sheffield, in Birmingham, we're just not going to be able to future-proof our party. So I've conveyed that already to your group, but I really do echo that point, and the point that's already been made. We are losing to the Greens. We are losing to the Greens, and we have to campaign differently in urban centres. It's not leaflets. There are a lot of doors we can't get to. We've got to think about digital, we've got to think about branding, and we've got to think about messages. Thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, and congratulations on your result. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Gordon. I now live in the Liberal Democrat utopia of Bicester and Woodstock, but I previously lived in Sheffield. I think, as others have said, I just don't think you can argue with the results. Like, fundamentally, we got the best results in our modern history, and you cannot argue with the strategy that delivered that. Having said that, the Greens gained seats off Labour, the Independents gained seats off Labour, the Conservatives gained a seat off Labour, and we moved backwards everywhere where we were fighting Labour. And I do think that we should be taking the opportunity to ask ourselves a few questions about both whether there was anything that we could have done to kind of mitigate that without undermining the strategy that delivered us our fantastic results, and also what we can do to sort of make sure that that's not happening again going forward, because we do really need to pivot now and make sure that we are opposing Labour, because they are not Liberals. They might not be quite as bad as the last set of Conservatives, but they are not Liberals.
True enough. But Laura, thank you. And it's great to see you. Thank you, Laura.
Good morning. My name is Matt Hodges-Long from Surrey Heath. We contributed one of the 72, and I led Al Pinkerton's campaign, so that was an amazing achievement that we delivered as a group. The first thing I want to do is just give a very big shout out to the HQ campaigns team. The role that they performed during this election was just amazing. Michael Wilson and Dan Purchase in our region especially, and the work of the bulk buy team with their print, and the amount of money that saved us. That allowed us to submit an election expenses declaration of just over £14,000, and we returned an MP. It was just amazing. But bringing me on to my point, in 2019, Al Pinkerton stood after being selected 3 months before the snap election. And it was a pretty hopeless scenario for us in terms of actually returning him as an MP, but we did well. And the key point was he stuck with us for the following 4.5 years, alongside his other Surrey MP candidates that actually delivered as well. And really what I want to shout out for is the early selection of candidates, even if you're in a location where you think there's no hope. Work like crazy for 4 or 5 years and you can actually deliver an MP at the end of it. Thank you.
Matt, thank you. Thank you and congratulations.
My name's Stuart Redaway. I'm from North Hertfordshire. I fully supported the targeted seats, and I did a lot of work in a targeted seat, which was not mine. What I would like to say is I'd like to see, it can be overdone, I'd like to see a bit more effort on getting leaflets out and campaigning in non-target seats, because that will build up for the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
Morning, Tim. My name's Rowan Fitton. I'm from Tameside. Did quite a few things this election. I was a candidate in Rosendale and Darwin. I was an agent for Tameside seats and High Peak. And I was also the LDC intern in the months leading up. So I wore a lot of hats, learnt a lot, and looking forward to using that in the future. But I wanted to talk a bit positive on maybe an example of best practice that the committee would like to look into. And that was Manchester Central. So I did a lot of work with the team in Ancoats and Beswick and stuff as the intern. And one thing that I saw quite well was the way that they use social media as a recruitment and capacity building tool. They were obviously an on-target seat. They, like myself, went down to the wonderful constituency of Hazel Grove to get amazingly smart elected. But the way they did that was they used their social media to build their team, to get people in, using targeting and postcodes and algorithms and all of this such, to then take them down to Hazel Grove to win. Yeah. So my suggestion to the committees maybe look at Manchester Central, look at other constituencies that have used social media as a capacity builder, as a recruitment tool, and feed that into maybe our development plan for non-target seats going forward.
Rowan, thank you. And thanks for standing for Epic Darwin. I'm pretty sure my cousins voted for you.
Richard Stretfield from Sevenoaks. I was the parliamentary candidate. I've got 2 points. I'm really glad to hear that the mindset is going to be looking forward, because I think that this review should be equally demanding as the last one, but with a different kind of mindset. Because winning silver isn't going to be the same as winning bronze. The other point that I have in common with a number of other speakers is about the targeting and feeding enough red meat to non-target seats and using them in association with the targets to fix opposition resources in places that we're not targeting, but we need work being done in order for the target seats to be successful at the levels that we need them. Certainly, Sevenoaks in relation to Tunbridge Wells was one such example, in my view, and is a model that could be copied going forward in order to facilitate unusual results that benefited us so much over the course of this election.
Thank you, Richard.
Hello Tim, I'm Councillor Sam Cumber and I was very, very active in the Sutton-Cheam constituency, which we won, now back in Lib Dem hands after 9 years of a Conservative MP. Whilst I was very proud of the results that we achieved in South West London, I'm going to have to echo some of the points made by previous speakers about how our performance was in urban areas where, unfortunately, we have fallen back quite considerably, whether maybe third, fourth, or even worse. So looking ahead to the 2026 local elections, which we'll be having in London, this does pose a bit of a problem with now the Greens second in a vast swathe of London seats. This is going to be very difficult. It could be a huge challenge for us to progress forward on the local level and then ultimately on a national level in urban areas. So I think in review we do need to be looking at how we connect with these kinds of voters. They're going to be younger and more transient. So that is definitely something I hope that in review you will be looking at into great detail so we can expand our party, expand our base. We need more young people, otherwise this party will not survive. So, and I see you're nodding, Tim, so we're in good agreement there. Thank you.
Cheers, Sam. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
I'm Marianne Gilbert. I'm in Loughborough, Charnwood and Melton local party. I was agent for our 3 constituencies and I was regional candidates chair for the East Midlands. So I had 47 candidates to find in an area which isn't one of the easiest, but we got at 47. Anyway, having got 47, we didn't end up with 1 MP at all, which was obviously disappointing. So, while definitely not wanting to be miserable and wanting to congratulate the great success of everyone else, I'm hoping that in the next election, you will be seeking out promising seats. We have 1 promising seat in Hinckley and Bosworth, and I'm hoping that you will think in future, as well as retaining the 72 you have, of identifying seats in other desert areas as far as Lib Dems are concerned and supporting those. Thank you.
I'm grateful. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for all that you did. Thank you.
Hello, Tim. Hello, Tim. So Julian Teasey here. So I was the PPC in Windsor and I'm part of the wider Windsor and Maidenhead party. Can I just start by saying thank you so much to HQ. And I know we haven't heard that for a long time, but HQ were really, really good. The candidate support was, I was quite taken aback by just how good it was. So thank HQ for that. I have one sort of further plea, I suppose, looking forward. So Windsor and Maidenhead, sort of 2 constituencies, and we were in that horrible middle ground, as it were. That we weren't clearly a nailed-on target, and nor were we a no-hoper seat. And at the start, rightly, we were sent to Wokingham, managed to get Clive elected. What we were seeing on the doorstep was, hang on, yeah, we're in, we've done it. And then there was that sort of horrible, well, should we be staying here, should we be going? And the plea is, I suppose, can almost treat us a bit more like adults and almost make it very clear what we need to do, and so we can challenge if necessary, or have to say, okay, fair enough, we are not a target. In the end, of course, as we know, we managed to get another one in. Josh, well done. We're now, I think, 21st in the next list. But overall, very, very good campaign, and thank you.
Thank you, Julian. And thank you for what you did. Amazing result.
Hi, my name's Charlie, and I was an organiser in the Freeman East Somerset seat, but my local party is Ashford in Kent. Just briefly to talk about Freeman East Somerset, our candidate was selected in February, and we won with a majority of 5,000 in July. That was absolutely amazing, and mainly due to the massive help that we were given by HQ and other regional parties, especially Bristol. But I'd like mainly to talk about the Ashford and other sorts of very small local parties in Kent and other parts, like the other delegate mentioned earlier about West Yorkshire. With a lot of these sort of very small local parties, the responsibility for keeping the Lib Dem flame going is reduced to one or two very committed individuals who often lack a lot of training and understanding about how to grow the party. And looking forwards, it would be amazing if we could have more support for those individuals so they have a better understanding of how to take the Lib Dems forwards in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, great points. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much.
Morning, Tim. David Kendall from Brentwood. I was the PPC for Brentwood and Ongar. And I've stood about 4 or 5 times before. We run the council in Brentwood. We always go in with a certain amount of optimism, but there's also realism. And what happened at the start of the campaign, we were asked to go and help Pippa up in Cambridge, South Cambridgeshire, which is a fair drive away, but a lot of us decided to go and help down in Chelmsford. The reason being is Chelmsford's our next door constituency. As it turned out, we won Chelmsford, which is a fantastic result. We've now got Marie Goldman, and we've got an MP in Essex, which we haven't had one since Bob Russell. So, fantastic result. The problem we've got is because loads of activists went into Chelmsford, when you look at the rest of Essex, you're really struggling now to identify where do we go next. And I'm sure that's the same right across the country. So it's your group looking at that, looking at seats and saying, how can we motivate those members in those seats to go for another seat in Essex and build on that success? So if we could look at that, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David.
Tim, everyone, good morning. My name's Adrian Betteridge. I'm the chair of the Woking Borough local party. And in Woking, we had a target seat, been a target seat for a few years, where we won. And we also had a non-target seat where we inevitably went a little bit backwards and the seat went to Labour. So I understand this problem we have of the different priorities. I would like to say thank you to everyone who came to Wokingham or any of the target seats, and actually an incredible 4 of the speakers this morning already came and helped us in Wokingham in that campaign. And that is one of the reasons we won, and we mustn't lose sight of that. I think many of us have got experience from our local elections of targeting wards, not targeting wards, the problems that causes. When you don't target a ward 1 year, you go backwards, you might want to win it in 4 years' time. So we understand this problem locally as well as nationally. We can't lose sight of the fact that it worked. We have 72 MPs. We played the system. And until the previous debate delivers electoral reform, we're going to have to continue to play the system. I wish the panel well in solving this quite wicked problem about how we keep everyone on board whilst we keep winning. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tony Vickers from Newbury. I've been most things to do with getting elected, from being a candidate to being on 3 other target seat shortlists. But my 2 points I want to make are one about the selection system and one about overseas voting. I was one of the 2 senior fully qualified ROs in South Central, where we went from 1 MP to, I think, well over a dozen. But we were a bit, we could have selected some of those candidates earlier, and the problem was lack of returning officers. And I think we need to really encourage that. I found it the most wonderful job looking at these brilliant people that put themselves forward to be candidates, 3 of whom I was the returning officer and they're now MPs, and 2 were very close touch. But the overseas voting system, I've got 3 sons and now a grandson who are overseas British citizen voters, and it is really a struggle to get them voting because of the postal system. So great what we've just heard in the last debate, but can we please support people? I know there's now an idea where we have a lead contact person in each country. And, you know, Lib Dem votes are there for the asking amongst the overseas because we are an internationalist party. So a bit more resources in getting those people on the register, even though it's difficult to get them to actually vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Ben Rich,
Now then,
former, former campaign director for Tim for Leader. I think there's been lots of people rightly congratulating lots of people who contributed to the campaign, HQ, the leadership team, the campaign team. I think there's one we've ignored so far, and I want to give a shout out to the Conservative Central Office, because it's inconceivable that they will run such a bad campaign ever again. Because of that, I want to just ask the review to make certain you look at the counterfactual where they actually run the campaign that they should. And we understand what would have happened and understand what things worked for us this time and what things would always have worked and what things wouldn't have worked if they had actually done their job.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. Excellent points.
Good morning, Tim. I'm Anne-Marie Barker from Woking, where I'm the leader of the council. We have 24 councillors now on Woking Council out of 30 and 0 Conservatives as of this year. And we added to that by adding the wonderful Will Forster as our new MP in July. The point I wanted to make, though, is I have lived many years ago in a constituency we were never going to win, so I have experienced that. And my thought was just looking forward, can we do more to help and support those seats that we've asked to help and support us during this election when we've been so successful? Can we do more both as MPs and as council leaders, because now, of course, we do control so many more councils, to go out and help and support outside of election time some of those seats, help them to build their parties, do some events that just generate some interest, tell them a little more about what we're doing, how we've been successful. Perhaps a process could be put in place. We do work at the moment, obviously, through the fantastic work of ALDC and LGA, but a particular programme that says, you know, you go here, you go there, and spread it between people. So there's a real balance between the different elected representatives that would really help. And I think also that earlier selection as well. If even in no-hope seats we could select early, at least someone's got a parliamentary spokesperson and someone who can do some work. We can get things done in those areas that we're not going to win, but at least we can build up a little bit of vote share.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much. Really grateful. Just looking at time, I think we've got 15 minutes before we need to start moving to summations, which by my dreadful maths tells me we've got 10 more people. Go for it.
Thank you, Tim, and morning, everybody. I'm Anthony Fairclough. I'm the leader of our group on Merton Borough Council in South West London, and I was a core part of the campaign team in Wimbledon, where we elected our first ever Liberal Democrat MP. Our overnight success began in November 2004. To come back, the point I wanted to make, or 2 points I wanted to make quickly, I wanted to thank everybody who came down to Wimbledon to help. We had fantastic numbers of people through the door, and that enabled us not only to deliver vast quantities of leaflets and bits of paper, but also to knock on thousands and thousands of doors. I did enjoy being lectured by a Labour Party activist on Twitter telling me we never spoke to anyone, we only deliver leaflets, and we were one of the most canvassed constituencies in the country, if not the most canvassed constituency. My other point was a lot of the speakers have talked about the support for non-target wards, and what I'd like to ask the panel to think about is the benefit of those volunteers who came to us and what they gain from coming down to target seats and how we kind of emphasise that. And I'd also say about the Green Party, I think we need to look at why people voted Green and how we respond to that. That's an obvious point, but I don't think it's an obvious answer. But thank you very much to everybody and HQ as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you very much.
Roger Wyborn from Cheltenham, representing a council seat in Gloucestershire. I think this is a two-election strategy. I think it's a fantastic result, and I think it's great to say, let's finish the job. But finishing the job on the present terms is mainly going to be another 20 or so Tory seats. And then what do you do after that? And I think there's a two-election strategy, and we need to be thinking about people who are not just second, but third and fourth and fifth. And, you know, we talk about development seat. What do we mean by that? And we need to be building the council base, building the base, winning council seats in places we haven't been maybe active for a long time, but we can be because we've got the right demographic and so on. I mean, by the way, I don't have any problem in wiping the Tory party off the face of the earth. We've already done it in Gloucestershire, in Cheltenham, but we do need to be thinking about, you know, quite strategically for two elections to build up different seats. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Andy Sanger, Sheffield Hallam. Morning, Tim. Morning, conference.
Morning.
We've been at target seat for 32 years. You win some, you lose some. You've got to keep going, and we'll be there again to take the fight to Labour in 4 or 5 years' time. So, three things to say. Firstly, we need to find a way of taking on the Greens in our cities. We cannot be replaced by the Greens as a third party in England. So we need to work much harder on that. Second, we need a clearer message when we're taking on Labour and clearer materials. And I thank the headquarters staff for all their support this time, but it was very much tailored just to us. Next time, it's going to be half a dozen of us, so let's get that material ready. Third thing is a mobilisation. We need to be clearer in it. Big thanks to all those who came and helped in Sheffield Hallam, but we didn't have the boots on the ground. We were only able to match Labour. We were not able to have more people on the ground than Labour. So big message for all of our non-target seats. We do need to help the strategy. Headquarters know what they're doing. So please, next time, when you're told to go somewhere, do go there. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And well done in Hallam.
Hi, Crispin Allard, Chair of Bristol Liberal Democrats. Agent for our 5 seats in Bristol, which we all lost, and also returning officer for a number of seats elsewhere in the South West, and we won all of those. Just wanted to talk about the direction we were given on which seats to help locally, and fully in support of the targeting strategy, but it's more around the nuance of the messaging. So we absolutely went where we were told to by Dave McCobb, first to Cheltenham, and then to Frome and East Somerset. But we also suggested to our members that you might like to go and help in Wells and Mendip Hills or Thornbury and Yate, depending on where you live in the city. And I think that more liberal, that more nuanced messaging really helped us get more people out and help get more of our MPs elected. So just a plea for next time, think about how the messaging, how it's landing with members when those emails come through, and maybe give us choices.
Crispin, thank you. And I know the members in Bristol did an absolutely stonking job in helping many over the line, so thank you very, very much.
Hello, I'm Judith Transon. I am the chair of the local party in Hounslow, although I'm currently on sabbatical. I just have 2 things about the campaigning in non-target seats. I want to echo what some other people have said. Not just about how we campaign, but the methods of campaigning. I know we had great success with door knocking. I have supported a number of campaigns and by-elections, and my experience of door knocking has been abysmal, especially in local parties where we have very strong Labour presence. People just don't open doors. Can we think and sanction from the headquarters alternatives to door knocking as a method of increasing our visibility before we get to that part of campaigning? And also, I had some feedback on the leaflets that we have delivered, and obviously I have received leaflets from other parties. I think some variety in how we create the leaflets and make them look a little bit different depending on the region that they're being aimed at would also be helpful.
Judith, thank you very much for your comments and for all that you've done.
Hello, I'm Sue Biles from West Dorset, where we don't only have an MP, but we also have control of Dorset Council. So we had a wonderful 6-7 weeks in the spring and summer. I just wanted to make a couple of points. I've been campaigning since the 1970s, so I've done good years and bad years. I think the improvements made from the campaign team from last election to this was incredible. much more supportive, much more targeted, and the stuff that was coming out and being sent in direct mail was matching the campaign, and that was really good. Also, I would like to huge thank you for the region, because the regional officers were incredible. And as we moved from being moving forward to moving forward plus, and then suddenly almost a target, the increase in help we got was incredible. So a call out to Josh Charles of Western Counties, because he was brilliant. But I'd like to go back to the beginning and echo with some things that have already been said. We had a huge problem with selection. I was the chair at the time. I spent ages on the paperwork, and then we waited a whole year before that candidate was selected, approved, and go forward to selection. And that was really difficult, and we lost a year. So I think that's something we do need to tighten up.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Morning, Tim.
Hi, Gareth. Hiya.
From Banbury. But rather than looking to stand in this election, I looked around at what was around us in Oxfordshire and decided the best thing for me to do was to help run the campaign in Bicester and Woodstock, and I ended up being the campaign convener there. And an absolute pleasure it was too. And in no small measure that was down to the work of H2 and the campaigns department. And I echo the praise that's been given earlier. They really were fantastic, and I hope the review captures the reasons why that was such a success. People commented earlier about candidates and expectations. One of the things that I found really, really helpful, perhaps learning from my past mistakes, is that for once there were really clear expectations as to what it would take to win this time. We spent an awful lot of work scenario planning, so we understood what we needed to do in the first 48 hours. So on the morning that Sunak called the election, I was able to send a message at 9:40 in the morning saying, so where is that Flying Start leaflet? It was at the printers within 2 hours. But I think it would be helpful to look at how we can share the understanding of what level of activity it took to win with perhaps some of the places where candidates are feeling a little bit sore and disappointed. Finally, you, I know, in Cumbria, Tim, have something of a county organisation. I know this because my in-laws up beyond Brampton have a Lib Dem councillor, thanks to a lot of the work that you've supported. We have that in Oxfordshire. Given our newfound strength in parts of the country...
Thank you. Yeah, we got that. Thank you, Gareth. Appreciate it, and well done.
Hello, Tim. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to be able to give our feedback. Philip Howells. I'm a Liberal councillor in Ledbury, and I was the PPC in Herefordshire North in the last election and in Wolverhampton West in this election. I've got 3 points. Herefordshire North, it wasn't a target seat, but we put considerable resources into it when I stood, and we were putting a lot into Herefordshire South as well. And we moved from up into a moving forward seat, one of only 5 seats that came second, with a lot of work from the office and about a team of about 30 helpers. My point about leaflets, the Greens have now taken that over, of course, as one of their target seats. And I know people complain about leaflets, and one of the big complaints about them was how many leaflets they put out for a Green Party, but it works. And so I think, we can't ignore the fact of leaflets. Second thing I wanted to say, I think it'd be quite useful to have, I read Mark Pack's book about, 101 Ways to Win Elections? Really a great guide, and it helped me a lot first time as the PPC. But I think it'd be quite useful to have some templates for 4 different types of seats, templates of what they need to do. So, for example, when I was in Hereford, I realised that I probably needed 300 hours, not 30. And the third point I wanted to make was in Wolverhampton West, I used to live there, so I was delighted to stand. There were 3 constituencies, all paid for by the same constituency, £500 apiece. None of us won our deposits. There was 0 chance. Would it be possible for the party to help refund those seats that have put candidates up, knowing they're going to lose their deposit, and they've got to save for another?
Sorry, we get that. Philip, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Belinda, how many more have we? With the last, but you've got great time in all of you. There you are. You can have 2 minutes.
Hi,
Go on.
hi, Tim. Hi, everybody. It's Isabel from Ealing, and yes, we are having a by-election. Now, I'm just going to start with a couple of cliches here. So it's money that wins elections. And just locally, somebody was saying, well, if you run a business, you vote Conservative, don't you? And I just want to know, or feed in, the fact of how can we as a party attract more business sponsorship and be more attractive to businesses? So, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Didn't even take the 2 minutes. Isabel, I'm very grateful. So just a few remarks from me before I'm going to hand over to Paul to summate on this session. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Belinda for stewarding all that perfectly. I'm really, really grateful. By my sort of scruffy calculations, there they are, 31 of you spoke concisely, interestingly, with great evidence. And I think all of you who spoke about the triumphs that we'd had, but recognising that there's prospects for us to do better. Our reminder that the survey is concluded on the 18th of October, so we want to listen to a lot more than 31 people. And so all of you are invited, if you haven't already done it, to submit the survey, fill in the survey and submit your views. We are here to listen and to learn. As I said earlier on, we are about looking forward. Yes, we need to review what we did about the recommendations after 2019. B, how did the election campaign go in 2024, both during and the run-up to it? But C, I'm going to argue the most importantly, and what lessons do we learn now, and what do we do next? I can predict nothing really about what will be in the final review, except there will undoubtedly be 80s pop music and football references, because they are the only analogies that ever work. So I've got two in my mind right now. And the first is this. It might come as a surprise to you that I'm a Blackburn Rovers fan. 30 years ago this season, Blackburn Rovers won the Premier League, which is an amazing thing. Thank you. And then we got into the Champions League. Amazing. And that's the first and last time we did. So we won the league and we missed our chance in the big league. We let Alan Shearer go, and it's been pretty average ever since. We're not being Blackburn Rovers, right? We've got our place in the Champions League, and our job then is to stay in the Champions League. And that means not just celebrating our successes, but making sure that we move forward and we take notice, not just of the things that you have all said today, but others as well. We want to keep on winning because it's a great habit to get into. And the final thing, I've referred to this hero of mine more than once in various fringe meetings this conference. So my kind of my favourite band is Prefab Sprout, and therefore my favourite songwriter and the greatest living English poet is Paddy McAloon, without a shadow of a doubt. He once said this on track 7 of the second album. He said, "You surely are a truly gifted kid, but you're only as good as the last great thing you did." Let's make sure that we don't just rest on the laurels that we have rightly won on the 4th of July. Our job is to go on winning for Britain, building a liberal movement that can become a serious contender for power in the future. Congratulations on July the 4th. We are not satisfied. We need to carry on winning. Thank you for being part of that. We're committed to making sure we deliver it. So that is all from me. We have got a great panel, a fantastic panel. I'm going to introduce to you now, again, Paul Farthing, my friend, who is on the panel. He's also the chair of the South East Liberal Democrat region. He's done lots of other things, including, most importantly, being chair of the Student Liberal Democrats in the late 1980s, and taught me many of my worst tricks. So thank you. Paul.
Good morning, conference. You would have thought 40 years ago I'd have learned the lesson never to follow Tim, and clearly I have not. I've got to go back and do that again. First of all, can I say a huge thank you for all the contributions and for all you being here this morning. It's been really insightful just to hear on your own words. You can read things and you can get bits of messages, but when people talk about their experiences, it comes across so much more clearly about actually how people think and feel about what's happened and the great opportunity that we have ahead. I also want to say now that at 11:05, Daisy Cooper's on, so don't go anywhere, because I've been reminded twice, and if I leave it to the end, I'll forget. So, Daisy Cooper, 11:05. What I heard out of that, and you heard a whole range of contributions, was some very specific important points, which I'll come to, but 3 really key themes that I think as a party we need to think about as we try and capitalise on this amazing result we've had of 72 MPs. And I think in all of this we have to remind ourselves just how well we've done. I think it was very important. I'm very pleased that some of the speakers picked out congratulating the national headquarters team on the campaign that they run. I've been in the party through a number of generations, and I think the level of support and engagement, even though there's still things to learn, was way better than we've seen in many elections over the last 10, 20, 30 years or so. So a big congratulations to them, and I'm sure everyone would appreciate that. And as successful as the targeting strategy was, though, there are clearly some implications that we need to think about that came through this morning. How do we think about the fact that in many parts of the country, we weren't able to run active campaigns in many of the seats that we want to look at in the future if we're ever to become a government, if we're ever to become the active opposition and get past the Conservatives? How do we think about taking the fight to the Greens and to Labour in the urban areas? And so there's two really important areas that came through. One is, how do we make sure that we're building our strength as a national party and not just as a party in the regions where we're already strong, while we have to make sure that our number one primary task is to not go backwards at the next election, because that can happen at all. Ben's point about the counterfactual is really important. We can't be in any way complacent that our political environment will stay as it is, but we've got to look at opportunities for how we move forward and how we strengthen in those many parts of the country where we weren't able to run full campaigns. I think the other thing that came through very strongly when thinking about those was about the impact of our approach to campaigning and our activity in urban areas. In Manchester and in Liverpool, and I did my student days that Tim referred to in Manchester. I know how difficult it is to actually be campaigning in some of those areas, even then, and it's got much harder now. We do need to think about new ways we can engage quite transient audiences and voter populations inside central Manchester, London. I think looking at the examples that, for example, Rowan picked out about social media is really important for us to look at. The third thing that came through very strongly was around candidate selection, and there were two bits on that I heard. One was we need to go on thinking about how we create the most diverse and talented pool of candidates, and particularly I heard about the importance about how we support candidates with disabilities to be equal players and have an equal platform through selections. The other part of that, though, was about the speed in which we can do selections, and I was really pleased to hear pick out one of our, particularly Malcolm, I think it was, who talked about assistant returning officers, assessors and returning officers. There was a series of really important roles across this party that sometimes get forgotten, and adding those people and supporting those important roles are a key part of how we can speed up elections. As a regional chair, I had to have some quite difficult conversations with candidates where I was only able to say, look, we've only have a certain number of people to assess you, a certain number of people who can manage the selections. We need more of those, and we put out that plea, but we need to go on thinking about how we build those roles, because that's a big part of how we can accelerate candidate selections. And we all know that whatever the strength of the seat, having a local leader, a candidate in place, can make a big difference to a campaign, can galvanise potential new members and supporters, and can help give time to innovate and try new sorts of campaigning activities. It's difficult to innovate and try things out when you've only got 4 weeks to do it in. But if you've got 2 years, you can really test and try out some new ideas and share that best practice across the party as we tackle some of the campaigning challenges that we face. I just want to pick out one or two other things which I think were important and we shouldn't lose sight of. There was something I think very important about the Lib Dems abroad. We heard that from Malcolm particularly and a couple of other people about this new dimension to the campaign and how we unlock the opportunity that's there, how we really understand what the scale of that opportunity is. Otherwise, we miss out hugely. There was something important about making sure that money, and I say this as a fundraiser in my background, money is really important in elections. So how do we strengthen our fundraising? How do we get more business support? How do we get that and build that skill base across the party came through as well? Charlie mentioned about the impact on officers in small local parties. I know the local party he refers to in Ashford, it's in my region. Some of our local parties really survive on the goodwill of 1 or 2 people. How can we actually support those people and come up with structures and ways of working that perhaps recognise that not every party has 50 or 100 people that might come to an AGM. Some people, they might literally get in the phone box But those people are the backbone of those areas. They've been working away in those areas for 10, 20, 30 years, keeping our party's flame alive in these very difficult areas. And we have to find a way to support them and perhaps lighten the load on them a little bit so they can spend more time campaigning and building us across the party structure. We heard something about mobilisation. It's always difficult for anyone to step out of their own seat because we always want to do well in our own community. It's the very essence of who we are, is that we're community politicians. We want to be successful in our communities. So yes, we want to encourage mobilisation. Yes, we want to think about how we can make that more flexible. We want to encourage people to go to where our best chances are. But we also heard about, we also recognise that many people won't move, can't move, and we have to find a way to actively encourage their activity and value that activity, not just the value of the activity, who are prepared to get in a car and drive up a motorway and work somewhere else. And that came down to comments both from, in terms of Anthony, about the overall volunteer experience that we have within the party. Our volunteers, you, are the absolute backbone of this party. And in some parties, we treat people very well. And other times, it doesn't go quite so well. And I suspect we've all had experiences where it hasn't worked as we might want it to have been. How do we think about the way in which we work and link with members and with volunteers so that we can encourage the very best out of people and make sure we really value the contributions they're making, whatever type of contribution that is, whether that's activity, whether that's donations, whether that's a little bit of admin, or sometimes just being out there in communities talking about the work we do. They all play an important part of the ecosystem that is our party, and we have to value all of those contributions, whatever it is that people feel that they contribute. So I think a huge number of things that we've heard in terms of some very important themes for us to take away. Again, a massive thank you. We have a huge opportunity to capitalise on what we've done over the last 5 years, what you have achieved. Now we've got to find a way, and we hope through the review we can help stimulate a discussion in the party about how best to move forward. And we hope you'll stay part of that conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, even, conference, and welcome to F31, which is going to be a speech by Daisy Cooper, who is the MP for St Albans and spokes for health and social care in the Commons, and also, of course, Deputy Leader of the party. So please give the lovely Daisy a warm welcome.
Conference. Guess what? We did it! And not just photobombing the Prime Minister. We helped kick out the Tories, we elected 72 MPs, and now we are the largest third party in Parliament in a century. Thank you. Thank you for every leaflet that you delivered. Thank you for every person, every resident you spoke to. And thank you for every penny that you donated. This is your win. Now, over the last few years, we've been on a winning streak. It started in Chesham and Amersham, where we knocked out the first brick in the blue wall. Then we won in North Shropshire, where we burst Boris's bubble. In Tiverton and Honiton, we showed Boris the door. And in Somerton and Frome, we demanded an end to the Conservative circus. Turns out those stunts were pretty tame, right? Those 4 incredible wins were all down to you. And on general election night, as the results came in, it was such a special moment to learn that all 4 of our amazing by-election winners had won their seats again. Not just because they're all fantastic MPs and colleagues, but because journalists can never again ask us whether Liberal Democrats can hold on to our by-election seats in a general election. But Conference, winning these by-elections and then winning on such a scale in the general election was never a given. Back in 2020, just after I became deputy leader, I remember one of my very first conversations with Ed, and it was quite sobering. He said to me, Daisy, we both know we've only got 11 MPs. But when you add up our majorities, do you know how few votes stand between us and extinction? Our majorities add up to 69,664 votes. If we lose just half of those votes to the Tories, we will be wiped out. Conference, since then, I have held that conversation in my mind every single day. During every media interview, during every canvassing session, during every local party fundraiser. But until now, I haven't shared that conversation with a single living soul. Why? Well, because Conference, we didn't want anybody to know that we were in survival mode. After boundary changes, we were notionally on 8 seats. Just 8 seats between us having a parliamentary party or extinction. But here's a new number for you. Our 72 MPs now represent 7 million people. In Parliament, I can't even go to the toilet without bumping into a Lib Dem. It's true. Anyway, now we have 72. What are we going to do with them? Well, first and foremost, the top priority in Parliament for our 72 Liberal Democrat MPs is being champions for our local health and care services. And there's a very simple reason for that conference. It was the #1 issue that came up on the doorstep. People struggling to see a GP or a dentist, children waiting months for mental health assessments, people waiting for cancer treatment or hip operations, devastating stories of ambulances that didn't arrive until it was too late. Our NHS pushed to the brink, our care services in crisis. So when my team and I set out to develop our key manifesto pledges, we did so knowing that our ideas on health and care could not only transform our electoral prospects, they could transform people's lives. Because, conference, that is what good health and care services do. They transform people's lives. And I should know, because they transformed mine. You see, 12 years ago, I was rushed to hospital. A few weeks in, I was told that without major surgery, I had just 4 days left to live. My weight had dropped to around 7 stone. My eyesight was failing. My heart rate had plummeted. And my arms were black and blue. I was fed only through a feeding tube. But it wasn't the prospect of major surgery that upset me. It was what they said next. Even if you survive, Daisy, even if you recover, you'll probably never work again. Your Crohn's disease is so aggressive. At most, you might be able to work 1 day a week, but nothing too stressful. You'll probably need surgery every 5 years or so. Here's an information pack about the benefits you might be entitled to. Conference, I lay in my bed on the 13th floor of that hospital and I sobbed. I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed for 17 hours straight. It felt like my world had fallen apart. As a campaigner, I have always found my meaning and purpose in my work. The causes I believe in, the injustices I want to fight, the people that I can work with. All of it, in that moment, potentially gone, snatched away. Or at least that's how it felt at the time. Hopefully, though, you can see that the story ends well. As is the case with so many millions of people, the NHS didn't just save my life. The people who make our NHS what it is gave me my life back. Thanks to them, I got my strength back. I put on some weight, and I decided to embrace my new life. But I'm not going to lie. I was really, really scared. And I often wonder what's happening now to the young woman or the young man who is suffering those same symptoms now. Can they even get an appointment with their GP? How long have they been waiting for a scan? Are they stuck in a hospital corridor rather than a ward as they scream with pain? Do the staff have time to hold their hand, to explain the disease, to help them wash? You know, as Liberals, we don't blindly defend the NHS because it's an institution. We defend it because it's the manifestation of an idea, a liberal idea, that our NHS should be free at the point of use and based on need, not ability to pay. And we, conference, we campaign for it because health is about individual freedom. You don't have freedom if you're on a waiting list so long that your world just shrinks and you're left hobbling from one room to the next. You don't have freedom if you're diagnosed with cancer, but you have no start date for your treatment. And you do not have freedom if you're ready to leave hospital and go home, but you're discharged instead to a care home miles away, losing mobility, independence, and connection for the sole reason that there aren't the care workers to help you recover at home. Conference, decent health and care services are the bedrock of a liberal society. That's why we put health and care front and centre of our general election campaign. It's why our MPs have been raising questions about local health services in Parliament en masse. And it's why we are demanding that this government make the autumn budget a budget to save the NHS and care. Conference, it is hard to overestimate just how bad the situation is. The Conservatives' legacy could not be worse. They've left the nation's health in a terrible state, ripping away people's freedom to live their lives to the full as they choose. Do you remember what they promised? The Conservatives promised to recruit 6,000 GPs. They promised to build 40 new hospitals. They promised that cancer patients would be able to start their treatment within 62 days, and they broke every one of those promises. They promised to fix social care for good. They promised not to put up taxes to pay for it. They promised that no one would lose their homes to pay for it either. And guess what, Conference? They broke those promises too. And Conference, they promised, the Conservatives promised that the NHS was safe in their hands, but they have brought it to its knees. We must keep their hands off it. We must keep taking the fight to the Tories. We must finish the job. But Conference, we have a message for the Labour government too. The NHS was a Liberal idea, driven forward by Labour, designed by Beveridge, delivered by Bevan. So Wes, if you're listening, take up our ideas or put forward your own. And if we support them, we'll back them. But if we do not see the right level of ambition or urgency, we will hold your feet to the fire. Conference. We, Liberal Democrats, must continue to campaign to save our NHS and care like our lives depend on it, because I know, and we know, that so many people's lives really do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daisy, for that rousing speech. And thank you, Conference. We are now going to be breaking for lunch, and we'll be coming back at 2:10 with an emergency motion, which will be chaired by Duncan Brack. I hope you all enjoy the fringes this lunchtime.